Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me at this workshop of this beautiful program. So I wanted to talk about some recent work. So yes, I slightly changed the title, but you will recognize the previous title is one of the works I will mention. And I wanted to talk about this first because there is a link with quantum divergences. So I hope you will like it. All right, and I'm originally a researcher from machine learning, so there's a strong link with machine learning applications. And, yeah, if you have questions, please go. So the context is the following. We are interested in comparing probability distributions, so typically over RD. And this is a fundamental task in many statistical and machine learning tasks, such as testing. For instance, if you want to test whether a model fits data samples, or in one of the applications I've considered a lot these last years, which is sampling as optimization, where in this case, you want to minimize some functional defined on the space P of RD, which is the space of probability distributions over RD. And yeah, this is challenging because it's an infinite dimensional problem originally. There are motivations for this sampling as optimization framework where you would like to minimize the functional. So the two applications I have in mind, and I will talk a bit about the second one in this talk. So the two applications I generally have in mind for this minimization problem are either Bayesian inference or generative modeling. So in these two applications, you want to learn a probability distribution that you don't exactly know. You have some partial information on it. So for instance, in Bayesian inference, people want to learn what they call a posterior distribution over the parameters of some machine learning model, or a neural network or anything. So you want to learn the distribution over the parameters, and you don't have access to the true posterior distribution, but you know typically that it has a density written as Q, a density written as Q that is Q tilde over Z, and you only know Q tilde, so the unnormalized density. So this is one first application. And the second one I have in mind for this kind of problems is the one of generative modeling. In generative modeling, people are interested in learning the data distribution. That is to say that you have, for instance, access to the images on the web. Okay, so you have access to samples of the distribution of natural images, and you want to learn this data distribution by generating new ones. Okay, so this is a problem referred to as sampling, where you basically want to be able to generate new samples approximating some, samples from a density Q. Okay, so this is roughly one of the big motivations for this work, and why we are interested in designing nice distances or divergence between probability distributions. Indeed, so if you think about the sampling problems I've mentioned, you can cast this problem as minimizing a functional f that would be a distance or divergence between P and Q, where Q is your target distribution. Okay? You don't know Q, you only have some partial information on it, but this is what you want to do. So Q is your target, and D would vanish only for P equals Q. And how you pick this D, this objective basically, depends on the information you have on the target pi. So if you think of the Bayesian inference application, people typically choose the Kullback-Leibler divergence that is written as follows. So the Kullback-Leibler divergence writes, so if P is absolutely constant with respect to Q, P with respect to Q, it writes as the integral of the log density with respect to P, and plus infinity else. And this is a very convenient objective when you don't know the normalization constant of the density Q. Okay, so why is that? If you do this exercise, okay, you have that the density Q is exponential minus V over Z, where you only know the V but not the Z. If you plug this expression in the KL, you see that the KL writes as two terms, where one is only involving the normalization constant, but as an additive term. So if you are performing optimization in the first argument P, you don't care about this term. This is why when people are interested in Bayesian inference, they want and that they only have access to the unnormalized density of Q, they would typically choose the Kullback-Leibler divergence for this reason. However, in applications where you for instance, you are dealing with discrete measures, which is the case when you have samples from the data of interest, like in generative modeling, you have discrete measure Q. You would not choose the KL, right? Because as soon as P and Q are discrete distributions with a different support, the KL is plus infinity. Okay, so for instance, if you're in the setting of generative modeling, you have true images and generated images, you won't use the KL to compare them. Indeed, if you're in the second setting, when you have a target distribution Q that you want to approximate, but only in discrete form, so you can think, as I was saying, as an empirical distribution, like you have true images, or you can think actually of something more general, like maybe for people that knowing MCMC, the output of some algorithm, sampling algorithm. You would choose an objective D that is convenient for discrete measures. So for instance, this is the case of integral probability matrix, IPM, that writes with respect to integrals, and hence they are convenient for discrete measures. For instance, you could pick the MMD, maximum mean discrepancy, which is an example of IPM that is very popular in machine learning because it's closed form. Okay, you can compute it very easily. So it relies on the notion of kernel, hence in my title. So a kernel is simply a function from RD times RD to R that you choose a PSD. Okay, so it means that if you look at the matrix K, XA, XJ, XJ for any point XA, XI, SJ, it's a PSD matrix. Think, for instance, of the Gaussian kernel. So this kernel is associated with a Hilbert space of functions. It's called the reproducing kernel Hilbert space HK, that you can see as limits of sum of kernel functions. Okay? And that satisfies this property that I've written in small here, if that is convenient for computation. Like if you take a function f in this RKHS, you have what is called the reproducing property, telling you that the scalar product between f and k at x is the evaluation of f at x. Okay, so this is where MMD comes from. And it's an integral probability metric, right? In the sense that it writes as a supremum, it compares P and Q through difference of integrals over a class of function, which is in this case a RKHS ball. Okay? What is nice is that you can work with this expression thanks to the reproducing property I've shown. And you can write this thing as, so you have two interpretations. Either you write it as a squared RKHS norm of the difference between the mean embeddings. So the mean embeddings are these things, basically the mean of the kernel with respect to the distribution. Okay, so you can think of having two distributions P and Q, sending them in the Hilbert space to this mean embedding and comparing their representations there. And if you continue working this expression, you actually have a closed form, which is very nice. You have basically sum and differences of integrals of the kernel, think of the Gaussian kernel, with respect to P, Q, and a cross term, okay, for respect to P and Q. So it's the only IPM I have in mind that can be written in closed form. Otherwise, you would have to solve this problem over some class of function. So this is why it's very popular. Okay, so if you are in the setting of generative modeling, you would take this one, for instance. But one question we had motivating this work was whether are these functionals good optimization objective? What happens if I try to minimize them, for instance, for the applications I've mentioned? The answer is not, and I will explain why. Think, for instance, of the Gaussian kernel. Okay, you pick two discrete measures P and Q. Okay, so you have a very nice simple expression for the MMD as a discrete sums. And here in this experiment, it's a very simple one where basically the P at initialization is a yellow cloud of points, and Q is the blue one. And we simply run gradient descent. Okay, what you can see through the iterations is that some of the particles in yellow collapse to the mode of the target, but some remain completely stuck. Okay, so this is basically optimizing this MMD objective with gradient descent. So we only optimize over the xi positions of the distribution P, fails miserably. And you can, so this is something we have investigated in this paper a few years ago. you have to work really hard to basically escape from these behaviors. You have to inject noise in the dynamics to optimize the step size like crazy. So it's really something naively performing gradient descent on the MMD would fail. Okay? Whereas it seems like a very simple problem. Just as a remark, because maybe I mentioned it at the end of the talk, there are MMDs with different kernels that perform really differently if you try to optimize them. This is the case, for instance, people have been using recently what they call the negative distance kernel. It's not PSD, but you can easily transform it as a PSD kernel. And in the end, if you don't care about RKHS, you can still use this kernel and define an MMD. It's actually called the energy distance. And it performs much better, okay, if you optimize this, and it has it has some convexity justification for that. But okay, so our starting point was the following. We know that the MMD is a very convenient object, very easy to implement, but if you optimize it, it will perform very bad. So I showed it on this very simple Gaussian to Gaussian cloud point, but you can imagine that if you use this as a way to compare images, you will have problems. So people used it, but they had to use a lot of tricks to make things work when they were using MMD.
So,
yeah, sure.
If I understand you correctly, you are saying that the Gaussian kernel makes the optimization problem non-convex?
Yeah.
And are you saying that using the energy, whatever kernel, makes it a convex problem?
Yes, so what is known is that this in 1D, if you use this kernel in 1D, the associated MMD is convex in the Wasserstein 2 sense, which is basically what is hidden behind this scheme. It's a discretized version of a Wasserstein 2 flow of this loss. So in 1D, it's known that the MMD associated to this kernel is geodesically convex. What I've heard is that when you look at this in dimension D, the convexity property degenerates. So I don't know exactly what happens theoretically in terms of convexity, but numerically, you see it performs well. That's all the question. Okay, so this was our starting point. And we basically proposed a novel object in this work. So in this paper called Statistical and Geometrical Properties of Regularized Kernel Kullback-Leibler Divergence, which was a joint work with my PhD student Clémentine Chazal and Francis Bach. Okay, and this work is actually a follow-up of work of Francis, so this is how we collaborated. So Francis Bach proposed in this paper in 2022 an object called the kernel Kullback-Leibler divergence, which has a strong link with quantum divergence, as you will see. It relies on the notion of kernel covariance operator that is defined as follows. So if you take a distribution Q in P of RD, the covariance operator with respect to Q is defined as the following operator, right? So you have an integral with respect to Q of this tensor product of kernel functions. So it's an operator from HK to HK, the Hilbert space defined by the RKHS. And basically, the kernel Kullback-Leibler, abbreviated as KKL, is defined as the composition of Kullback-Leibler divergence or relative von Neumann entropy on operators, and this covariance, kernel covariance operator, right? So you would write for two distributions P and Q that the KKL is this thing, so the trace sigma P log sigma P minus trace sigma P log sigma Q, that you can write with respect to the eigenvalues and eigenvectors of these two operators. Okay? So yeah, you may recognize this von Neumann entropy applied to these covariance operators. Some remarks. You can see this divergence as compared to the MMD where we were using kernel mean embeddings. Recall that we were using integral of the kernel with respect to P to compare probability distributions. Here we are comparing, we will use basically second order, second order manner to represent the distribution through this covariance operator. Right? We compare P and Q through these objects. Okay. Second, so Francis showed in his paper that he could frame the KKL between the KL and some smoothed KL. Okay, so it's the K tilde here is not exactly the kernel involved in the definition of sigma q, but you can see this as something that is smaller than the original KL and that is bigger than the smooth KL. And it would be separating, okay, so it cancels only for P equals Q under very mild assumptions on the kernel. So these assumptions on the kernel, basically, you will need that the embedding from P to this sigma P is injective. This embedding uses this tensor product of kernels. You can show that this is defines an isometry with the RKHS defined by K square. So basically, this condition, for people a bit familiar with kernel, you need K square to be characteristic, which is exactly this definition of an injective mapping. Okay? And you have mild sufficient conditions to get this kind of thing. If you want to simplify your life, if you think of the Gaussian kernel, it works. Okay, so this is a valid divergence. Very nice. Our questions were the following, as I've motivated. First, what is its behavior for empirical measures? Can you compute it in closed form? How does it behave with respect to the number of samples? And is it a suitable optimization objective? If I fix Q and I optimize P, does it work as bad as DMMD or better? Okay, so in this work with Clémentine, we thought about this, and we first noticed few things on the KKL object that were motivating regularization that we mentioned. First, if you think of the KKL, and when is it finite, you actually need that the kernel of sigma q is included in the one of sigma p, right? Otherwise, you will have a problem with this log sigma q. This condition is satisfied, for instance, as soon as the support of p is included in the one of q. Okay, so it would be it's the same condition as for the standard KL to be finite. And here we have just written the small computation showing it. You take an element in the kernel sigma q. You basically write that it involves that the integral of f squared with respect to q is 0. The RKHS being composed of continuous functions, this implies that if the support of p is in the one of q, you have this condition. Okay. Okay, so this is when the KKL is finite, but then it's not convenient as the standard KL when you are comparing two distributions P and Q with different support, which is exactly the case when you work with discrete measures or empirical measures. So the simple fix we thought about, which is actually a fix that people use for regular F divergences for P of RD, is the following. We just introduce a small parameter alpha, and basically we consider the original object, the KKL, between P and a mixture of P and Q, right? So you immediately solve this support problem. So this will be our object. It recovers, of course, the KKL as alpha goes to 0. It goes to 0 when alpha goes to 1, so you should really focus on the case where alpha is small. And it does not introduce any bias, okay? It's still 0 for P equal Q. So if you minimize the KKL alpha, the minimizer is still Q, okay? Okay. So a few remarks. When we looked at this object, we first started to wonder how does it behave with respect to alpha? Is it, yeah, how does it behave? So first, you can show that if you fix P and Q, this is a decreasing function of alpha. Okay, it's monotone. And second, we could quantify the bias of this regularized object with respect to the non-regularized. We have a bound that depends on the bound on the density ratio and alpha. Okay, so basically you see it depends. It's in alpha and alpha square. Okay, for alpha small. And these are properties that are expected because for the regular KL, and if you were considering a regularization, okay, of the standard KL between the probability distribution and RD, you would have these exact things. You would have that the KL, the regularized KL, is also monotone decreasing. And you could obtain a similar bound where instead of having this quantum quantity, I would say, you would have an integral log PDQ. Okay, so these things are expected. But in this work, we had to work with very different tools in the end because we go through this operator mapping and we had to use identities, such as this one, that really use operator monotony in the end for things to work. Okay. So our first important result was the following. We wanted to understand, and we could show, how this object, the KKL alpha, behaves when you compare an empirical distribution versus its population version. Okay, how does it behave with respect to the dimension, for instance? And we had rays that are independent of the dimension. So our conditions were the following. Here we assume P absolutely continuous with respect to Q, with some bound on the density ratio, some Mills bound on alpha. We need a quantity that I could detail that basically hides a bit something on the fact that P has a full support. And if you consider two empirical versions of P and Q, supported on M and M samples, we could get the following bound. Okay, so you see it involves M and alpha. And a few remarks. Maybe you have noticed that I have assumed that P was absolutely continuous with respect to Q, which is not something natural because this object, the KKL alpha, is well defined, and I've motivated it because it was well defined for discrete measures with different support. So the reason is that we could have done an alternative proof without this condition, but it was scaling worsley with respect to alpha, okay, as alpha goes to 0 in alpha square instead of alpha. If you simplify a bit things, like if you think about n equals m, this bound behaves as log n square over n plus log n over square root of n. So you should think of it as 1 over square root of n rate, which is independent of the dimension and which is very nice. It's something shared by the MMD, and it's actually a motivation why people have been using MMD in high dimensions. But so yeah, we were happy about this result. So the proof, which is very technical, I've hidden it. Clémentine has done great work on that. It's a very long proof involving a concentration of sums of random self-adjoint operators and estimation of degrees of freedom.
So is this bound similar to what we would have gotten with the MMD also?
MMD you would have got without the log square root of n. Yeah, I didn't recall it here, but yes.
So the log wouldn't appear from any of the two terms?
No, MMD you have no log here. You would have only the second term without the log. Yeah.
And means I don't understand why you take alpha something different from half. You could have taken it to be half, right? Or is there a reason why you want to take it to be close to 0, or is that what you want to do? Because
good question. So when alpha is close to 0, we are close to the original object, the KKL, which is very sensitive to the fact that P and Q have different support. So if we keep alpha close, we keep this behavior of explosion when P and Q have different support. Otherwise, we could have kept alpha. It's a valid diversion still. Yeah, thanks for the question. Other questions? So it's something we can. Yeah, sorry. I think I have the plot later. I've talked about KKL for discrete measures, so empirical measures on the previous slide. The nice thing is that you can actually compute this thing in practice. Okay, so if I give you two discrete distributions, P hat and Q hat, you just have to define what is called the Gram matrices. Okay, so Kp hat would be the kernel matrix over xj atoms, Kq hat over yj atoms, and here you have a mixed matrix. And then the KKL between these two discrete measures can be written as this trace involving these Gram matrices. Okay, so you have a Kp hat and here an expression involving big K, where this big K is simply a big matrix that we have constructed through stacking this Kp hat and Kp hat Q hat. Yeah, so it's a very nice thing. If you think about the original expression of this kernel Kullback-Leibler expression I've showed you, we started from operators that are infinite dimensional objects. You would have to compute the spectrum of these operators. in practice, when you work with discrete measures, you end up with working with gram matrices and spectrum of these matrices. Okay, so very nice. In terms of computational cost, if you think, okay, how much does it cost me to compute these things for 2 p hat and q hat, it's n plus m cube, right? Because you have to get the spectrum of this n plus m matrix. Okay, so this is more expensive than the MMD. Okay, I didn't mention it, but if you remember the expression, if you remember, I will be nice. I will show it again. This is n. Let me take n equals m. This is n squared, right? Because I have double sum, so it's more expensive than the MMD by an order 1. Okay. Regarding, so we tried experimentally to verify these results. They agree with what we found theoretically in the sense that here we took, so still the Gaussian kernel, which is the most classical one, dimension 10, some bandwidth for the kernel, and 2 different Gaussians P and Q. We look at how this KKL alpha behaves for empirical versions of this P and Q regarding the number of samples. Okay, so it indeed decreases respect to the number of samples, and we have this monotony in terms of alpha that we described originally, right? That if you take alpha bigger and bigger, you decrease. Which, to come back to your question, Woody, you have more discrimination in some sense when alpha is smaller because of this monotone behavior. Okay. All right, so we know already that it behaves well for empirical measures, right? That the statistical rate is independent of the dimension. So it's a nice thing because it tells you that if you want to compare discrete measures in high dimension, then this is a good way to compare them. Now we were wondering what happens as you want to optimize this objective. Okay, so recall I had this motivation originally of generative modeling, for instance, where you have a distribution of interest over true images. Okay, you don't know this distribution, but you have access to samples, like true images here, and you want to generate new ones. There are a lot of methods in the generative modeling literature that I don't cite here, but if you've heard about generative adversarial networks, this kind of stuff, even diffusion models have a relation with this. Basically, what they do is to transport an initial tractable measure P0. So by tractable, I mean you can easily sample from it, you have access to its density, and they would push this through some process to approximate the target distribution. So here, think of the one of images. And for instance, for GANs, for generative adversarial networks, it's an easy exercise to write that their optimization algorithm is actually minimizing some divergence, which is the Jensen-Shannon divergence. So here in this work, this is why we tried in the following experiments some stuff about that. We wanted to understand what's the behavior of the KKL gradient descent when used as an objective, okay? So in practice, how do you do? It's very similar to what I showed before. So you have a target distribution Q that you want to approximate, and you will start with a collection of particles from the P0, from the tractable measure, and you can evolve them. You choose a step size gamma, and you push these particles indexed by I at each iteration L by some vector field, okay? This vector field that I wrote grad Wasserstein to F, I've given the definition here. It's you can think of it as a Wasserstein gradient. It's a notion of gradient of the objective F. Okay, so if you think that our objective is the KKL alpha between P and Q, we want to differentiate that. You can compute what is called the first variation at distribution P. So it's the most standard notion of differential you may have in mind. So it's a function from RD to R, and if you take the gradient of this thing, you will get this Wasserstein gradient, which is a map from RD to RD. Okay, so this is what you would apply to your particles. Okay, so this is our scheme. Okay, you should think of this is my distribution Q in discrete form, and this is the particles that I push. And what I've said in terms of assertion gradient, it's really when you have an object here, F, that is well defined for discrete measures, it's a very fancy way to present gradient descent. Okay, in practice, think of reparametrizing. So this thing depends on the discrete measure P of the particles. You can reparametrize it as a straight F, and this is gradient descent of this object. Okay, so I'm just showing. In practice, you're doing gradient descent of this objective. The story behind is that you're discretizing a Wasserstein flow. Okay, so you need to compute this scheme to be able to compute the Wasserstein gradient that depends on the first variation. The good news is that we could compute this guy. So the same thing, it was requiring some work because you need to differentiate through spectrum. Okay, so this is the expression we got. If you give me two discrete measures, P hat, Q hat, with some matrices, so what I call the Gram matrices, okay, that were depending on the support of these distributions, then we can compute the first variation at any distribution P hat. So typically in the scheme, you would use the current distribution of the particles. And this first variation basically admits this form. So at any point x where you would evaluate it, you have an expression involving matrices multiplication. Okay, and you see this G function would be applied to these Gram matrices. So you need to do this operation on the spectrum. Okay, so once again, you still have this same cost. Since you need to access the spectrum, you have this cost in n plus mq. Same cost as computing the objective itself. Any questions on this part?
Yeah. What is K? So K, P hat.
It's a big matrix.
Oh, so that's a big circle.
Yeah, big K involves the samples of P hat and the one of Q hat. So P hat is the thing you optimize, and Q hat is the thing you want to approximate. So this is why. So you need some everything. Yeah, you have things involving P hat and things involving the two because you need to match P hat to Q hat. All right, so before I showed you some experiments, we wanted to compare both, so our new object, both to the MMD, which was the poor candidate I showed at the beginning, and more recent competitors from the literature. So the competitors I will present now, they also basically leverage F divergences, okay, that are very sensitive to the to the difference of supports between P and Q, and kernels. But they do it in a different way. Okay? How they do is the following. If you think of F divergences, okay, I've showed you at the beginning of the talk that they write as some convex function, so the integral of a convex function F of the density ratio between P and Q. Okay, so you need F convex and F that cancels at 1. So for instance, with the KL, it corresponds to this function f. For the k squared, it corresponds to this x minus 1 squared function. And they admit a variational form. Sorry, it's not from this paper, but this paper uses it. This variational form rewrites the f divergence not as an integral probability metric, where you would have the difference of the integral of a function h with respect to p and q. Here you see that you have the integral of h with respect to p minus f star of h with respect to q. And f star is a convex conjugate. So it's not exactly an integral probability metric. You can, so I've recalled what is the convex conjugate. You can easily compute this f star, for instance, for the kl and k square. And what people have done, so including myself, is to restrict the search space of these f divergences to be something smaller than originally the set of all measurable functions. So, and if you can restrict this space to be a reproducing kernel Hilbert space. Okay, so much smaller space. So this has been done in the case for the KL. It has been done in this paper by Pierre Glaser, Michael Arbel, and Arthur Guetten. where the resulting divergence was called KALE, okay, instead of KL, which is from a few years ago. And we've recently done it for the K-square in this paper with Pierre and Arthur that were already here, and Hudson, Aratrika, and Barat. So how does it look like? If you think of the KALE, you have to write it this way. So how they wrote it in the paper. You take the previous formulation I've showed, like the one for the KL, and basically you restrict it to a RKHS space. Okay, so you can introduce a parameter lambda, penalizing the RKHS norm of this candidate H. And if you define things this way, you have an object that interpolates between the original KL between P and Q and an MMD, okay, as lambda goes to infinity. It's also unbiased. For any lambda, the minimizer is still a Q. However, if you look at two discrete distributions, P and Q, I give you two empirical measures, for instance, and I ask you to compute the KALE, it's not closed form. You can write this as a discrete sum, okay, over the support of P and Q if discrete, and it writes as a nice, strongly convex n-dimensional problem, but you have to solve it, okay, with Newton, for instance. So it's not closed form. So this is in contrast with the KKL, the object I showed, the one we proposed with Clémentine and Francis, that is closed form. And this is very nice, for instance, if you need to optimize these objects. For instance, if you need to run some gradient descent schemes, when you have a closed form for the loss and for the gradient, you can use like quasi-Newton schemes like LBFGS that automatically choose the step size. So it's really an advantage. Okay, so in terms of experiments, to show you a bit what's happening between what we propose and the competitors, these are simple experiments that are in the paper where, for instance, here, so we choose a very small alpha, okay, for our KKL, so that we are close to the original behavior. We use a Gaussian kernel with some bandwidth sigma square, and we will use discrete measures with size n that is 100. On this example, that is relatively classical in this field, the target Q is discrete, supported on these three rings, okay? And the original distribution P is also discrete, but here you see it's initialized on a very small part of the space. And we plotted here, so for different times, the progression of gradient descent schemes, where you basically push P onto Q. What you can see, so for the MMD, so the MMD, if you remember, it's an integral probability metric. It compares distribution through difference of integrals. It is not sensitive to the mismatch of support. So the particles, they basically travel a bit everywhere, okay, and they manage to approximately recover the rings, but with some difficulties. The KALE, which is the approximation of the KL I showed just before that was relying on the rational formulation restricted to RKHS, is much closer to this F divergence behavior, where it's very sensitive to the mismatch of the support, and you see that particles, they travel on the rings, mostly, okay? And for the KKL, we have something a bit in between. It's less sensitive to the mismatch of support, so we can see that particles can be more spread. But still, we managed to get very good matching results in the end. So here it's different examples where, okay, maybe it's less easy to see from far, but the MMD performs less well. You have outliers compared to the KL and KKL. And once again, the main advantage we have compared to the KL is the closed form of the loss for discrete measures. Something that is not in the paper, but we think of working on it, and it's related to this motivation of generative modeling I showed you. These are experiments from Clémentine, where basically she wanted to do more complicated experiments as what I showed before, but still the same principle of starting from a simple distribution, like a Gaussian, and pushing it to some target distribution. Here, images. Okay, so these are iterates of the flow. which show that this flow converges well even in very high dimension, whereas if you were trying this with MMD, it would fail miserably. And in red, it's just she was looking for the closest image in the target data set of the final sample. Okay, so this is a comparison between final sample and target one. So yeah, it's I would say it's not an easy subject. Like if you're interested about it, we can discuss after the talk. But it's not exactly easy to generate new samples with these approaches of gradient flows, right? Because if you think about it, if you're minimizing some divergence between p hat and q hat, if you're solving it exactly, you will collapse on q hat if you have the same number of samples, right? So you need to be a bit more inventive if you want to generalize. And, there are several approaches in the literature that we are interested in that can do that. So yeah, happy to discuss if that's of interest for you. But why I wanted to show this is to show you that even in high dimensions, the flow is working very well. Okay. Another competitor that is related to the Keil example. It's work that has been done a bit at the same time. So it's related to interpolating between the MMD and the chi-square. So it's also relying on the same recipe as the Keil divergence, which was using a variational formulation of a F divergence and restricting it to RKHS. So here we do it with the chi-square instead of the KL. Okay, so you may recognize something we have seen a few slides ago, which was the variational formulation of the chi-square, and restricted to this RKHS. But the main difference is that compared to the Keil, okay, so playing this game with the Keil divergence, this admits a closed form representation. So it's still a divergence for any lambda, interpolating between chi-square and MMD this time. It's closed form. It's written in this manner. So if you forget about this constant term, you may recognize like what we call the deregularized MMD. If you remember the MMD I've shown at the beginning of the presentation, it was a difference. It was a square norm between the difference between the mean embeddings. Okay, these elements MP and MQ were the integrals of the kernel with respect to P and Q. Okay, and now this difference is rescaled by this operator sigma Q regularized. Okay, so this I've written the general formula, but you can compute this thing for discrete measures. It's simple. You can compute easily its gradient as well. So if you write this with discrete measures, P and Q supported on N and M samples, you will have the same cost as MMD and M plus something that is due to this inverse of the covariance operator related to Q, right? But if you think about it as an optimization problem, Q is fixed, so you only invert this once, and then you never touch it again. So the main cost is the one of MMD. Okay, so yeah, so you can think of it. What is nice, it's an MMD with a regularized kernel. So I hide a bit the detail here. But in terms of statistical rate, we didn't have to do the job since it's an MMD. We inherited the rates derived by Arthur Gretton a few years ago, which is also independent of the dimension. And very briefly, this converges very well as well on the same examples. This is the DMMD. So basically, think of these two as the same objects. One is the KL, one is the K-square, but with this RKHS regularization. How much time do we have? Yeah.
Are any of these convex problems ultimately or no?
Sorry, say it again. Are these convex?
Yeah.
Very good question. So, so these things, like here, I'm basically looking at problems like KL between P and Q. We know that if Q is a distribution that is log concave, okay, like for instance a Gaussian, these objects are convex in the Wasserstein geometry. So if I do gradient descent, I inherit this convexity. Here I have two problems. So Q is not necessarily convex. And second, I'm not using a KL anymore. or a chi-square. So both KL and chi-square inherit this convexity. Yet, in this paper, for instance, the DMMD, which is on arXiv, we studied a bit the convergence of these flows, of the DMMD flow, and we used the fact that DMMD was close to a chi-square, and for the theoretical analysis, if you assume things such as Poincare inequality, you can basically work things out, saying that if lambda is small, if you're close to the chi-square and the problem is convex, it will stay convex. So in brief, if lambda is small, it's close to be convex for nice target, but this lambda, basically, if it increases, you get away from convexity. But you gain some smoothness. It's a bit the trade-off. Thanks for the question. Okay, so we'll try to so the last 5 minutes will be dedicated to an ongoing work with Arturo Castellanos, Pablo Mozarovsky, and Hicham Janati from Telecom Paris. And this work is also about, so this is the current title. It's not online because it's ongoing. And it's also about similar ideas of using quantum divergences for and kernel covariance operators to define divergence between probability distributions. The idea we had in this work is very simple. It's relying on the same objects. Okay, I'm still manipulating kernel covariance operators that we've seen. Okay, and we called it the kernel trace distance. But basically, what we look at is a Schatten-1 norm between sigma p and sigma q. Okay, so I recall this definition. This is the square root of the adjoint of t times t. And similarly, so sorry, I should have written k-square characteristic, but universality is one of the sufficient conditions for that. It's a well-defined distance. Okay, if you're mapping sigma p is injective from p to this space of operators, it's a well-defined distance. Okay. Why is it interesting? So first, I'll be brief, but it's easy to compare it with many existing distances. For instance, since we know that the Schatten norms have some order, okay, and that actually the Schatten 2 norm corresponds to the MMD with k-square, you can compare this to the MMD. Okay, so it's more discriminative. And MMD with k-square, if you think of a Gaussian kernel, it's still an MMD. Okay, it's still an MMD with a Gaussian kernel. You simply change the bandwidth. We could show as well that this kernel trace distance writes as an integral probability metric. Okay, so a supremum of difference of integrals over a class of function. This class of function is characterized here. So sorry, phi of x is the kernel. And it's a class of function with values in -1, 1 that is included in particular in the one defining the total variation. So it's also smaller than the total variation, which is an IPM with functions in -1, 1. We have also a way to compare it, I'll be a bit fast, but to the, basically what people have called the kernel Burs-Wasserstein, which is simply a Burs distance between these operators sigma p and sigma q. This is due to the Fuchs von de Graaff inequality, where it's less discriminative than the Burs distance, but more than the Burs square. And thanks to Pinsker inequality, previously I showed you Kullback-Leibler divergence between these operators. Basically, we know that this square Kullback-Leibler is bigger than the TV, hence this distance. Okay, so yeah, so it's relatively easy to compare this distance with objects that we've seen and that we know already. Okay, so bigger than an MMD, smaller than a KKL, and so on. Very briefly, it's easy to compute this thing in practice with similar tricks as we've seen for the KKL. You just simply need to construct the appropriate Gram matrices. So if you think about what it is, you need to get the singular values of this operator, sigma p minus q. And if you have discrete measures, you can define the associated Gram matrices and construct a big matrix K, depending on all these samples from P and Q. And if you get the eigenvalues, singular values of this guy, sorry, you can compute this distance. Okay, so it has the same complexity as the KKL we've seen before, because similarly, you need to get the singular values of a matrix of size n plus m. So similar trick. we could get rates. So I'll be a bit fast because I'm out of time. We could get rates, this time with a high probability, but you need some assumption on the polynomial decay rate of the kernel. Oh, sorry, on the decay rate of the eigenvalues of this operator, and it's related to the kernel. So depending on whether you have a polynomial decay or an exponential decay, you get rates that degrade with respect to this square root of n rate or that are of the same order. This I'll keep. And just to show you some experiments, it works much better than the MMD as well. So this is the ongoing work by Arturo. This would be a target distribution, initial particles. With MMD, you see that you have this problem I've mentioned where particles, some of them collapse to the target and some of them stay stuck. And this is a trajectory with DKT. So I think I'm out of time, so I will skip this part, but we also have experiments on the Bayesian inference task. So we'll jump to the conclusion. So what I tried to show in this work, so these are recent works about, we introduced these novel divergences between probability distributions that rely on this kernel covariance operators. So you can think of it as representing your probability distributions with these operators and using quantum divergences with these representations. What is nice is that for discrete measures, you have closed forms, so with a cubic cost, but still. They enjoy nice statistical rates, okay, in the sense that this, if you look at this divergence, the difference between the empirical and population version, the statistical rate does not depend on the dimension, okay, it's of order square root of n. And as I said, they have a cubic cost, so they are more expensive than the MMD that is squared, but they perform better, in particular on these optimization tasks. There are a lot of things missing, statistical lower bounds, okay, to get whether our results are sharp. Quantization rates, which is a slightly different task, where you don't look at empirical measures, but quantized one. Also, if you're interested in understanding what's happening for the algorithms and for the flow, typically you want to understand whether your vector field has nice regularity properties. So for instance, if your vector field is Lipschitz, you directly get things such as propagation of chaos, so quantify how much the empirical distribution of the particles deviate from an ideal system of independent particles. So this requires Lipschitzness of the vector field, but with the objects we have, it's not Lipschitz. You need a stronger assumption. And related to the question of Boudi, if you want to understand the optimization properties of this scheme and guarantee rates of convergence, typically for gradient descent, you need smoothness and convexity. And this requires to get upper and lower bounds for the convexity on the Hessians of these objects, but in the Wasserstein sense. So it's something that we've been doing, but it requires strong assumptions on the distribution, so we didn't put it in the paper. And one of the questions I have is whether we could use functional inequalities for this object as well. This is not known. Yeah, and just I'm finishing here. Some of these things I'm mentioning are known for the MMD. Okay, so I think it's possible. And also for some of the objects I've showed, but not for this lossy. So, thanks for listening and happy to take questions.